Welcome to the Leaderonomics Show. I'm with Kate Sweetman, author of The Leadership Code, and most recently, Reinvention. Kate, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here.
Glad to have you here. You know, it's so interesting, and you have such a fascinating background, starting in research, right? In Harvard, you were part of the Harvard Business Review publication and doing research there?
That's right. Well, I graduated from Harvard Business School,
okay.
And so I was a researcher for a year,
okay.
Which was a lot of fun. That's actually basically case writing,
okay.
because that's how Harvard operates. So it kind of got under my skin, and ever since then, I've always been doing a bit of research, a bit of writing and consulting, and I've generally got a lot of things going on.
And tell us a bit about what happened. So you were at HBR, and then what happened in your career?
Well, after I graduated from Harvard Business School and I was a researcher, then I was a consultant for 5 years, which was really an amazing time because it was the early 1990s. And it was the time when American businesses were really expanding out across the globe. One of the things we talk about in Reinvention is that a huge shockwave, a huge force that has really changed the world is true globalization. And I feel like I was definitely a part of that because we were working a lot with Fortune 200 companies. And first we would be going to New York and New Jersey to visit them. And then we'd be going to London or Paris to visit them. And then eventually you go to Asia to visit them, and you start in China. That's right. So I lived that transition, and then I got away from the consulting itself to go to work for Harvard Business Review, where I was an editor.
Okay.
And I got to work with some very cool people like Jim Collins and Ryan Heifetz, and sort of.
Tell us a bit about that experience and
it was
some
actually
of the insights you drew from there.
Yeah, for me it was the road not traveled because I had been actually an English major when I was in university.
That's right. Yeah.
And so for me, publishing, media, all that was a bit of the road not traveled. So it was really exciting to be there. And of course, I had a background in business by that point. So it was a chance to sort of work with and match wits with some people who are extremely accomplished in our field.
Right.
And so it was.
And we forgot to talk about this. You know, what drove you to study English or to? And you studied in Yale, right?
I did. I studied.
How did that decision come about?
Well, I was not a very sophisticated high schooler, and of course this is before the age of the internet. And so literally my mother read in Time magazine that Yale had a really good English program, and so that's where I ended up going.
Mother's always right.
Mother's always right, exactly right.
Okay.
And as far as why do I love English and literature and all that because part of it is the art of it, but a lot of it is the truth that's in it. A lot of it is the truth that's in it because even in fiction, you can learn more than from fact because it's an opportunity for a really good writer to bring together all the themes and ideas that they want to explore.
Okay, and that led you to the Arbel Group and a couple of other opportunities, right?
Yeah, so the writing background, for anybody out there who says don't major in liberal arts because you can't get a job, it's not true because the beauty of the liberal arts is that you learn communication. And you learn to sort of integrate ideas. And so for me, in my career, it's been a real advantage to be able to articulate and write and communicate in that way. So I was really lucky because I met Dave Ulrich, who's a fantastic guy, and he's been a real mentor and sponsor to me. And Norm Smallwood, same thing. And they invited me in on a writing project, and that made a big difference to my career.
And what was the project about?
The project was what became the Leadership Code, which is the first book that I ever published.
Okay, tell us about Leadership Code.
Well, the Leadership Code, I think, is a useful book because leadership is one of these words that gets tossed around. And one of the things that all of us had noticed in our work within corporations was that people use the word leadership in very different ways. And there are a lot of competing ideas which are not wrong, but which are not complete. Is it emotional intelligence? Is it bottom line results? Is it being nice to people? Is it is it being a servant leader? Like what is it? What is it?
Yep.
So we said, you know what? Let's just look into this thing. Let's please define leadership so that people are talking about the same thing when they're talking about leadership. So we talked to a lot of different people, we looked at a lot of studies, we looked at a lot of reports, and what we basically said was, look, people who create organizations that last, the leadership aspect of that is basically four things, four sets of activities, and a certain set of attributes of the individual as well. So we feel that with the Leadership Code, we've sort of outline the map of the terrain of leadership. And within that, you can infinitely explore,
Right.
right?
What would those 4 things be?
So basically, leaders are people who are able to both think and act in the long term
Okay.
and in the immediate term. And they can really think and act around the business of what it is they're trying to do and around the people of what they're trying to do. So in the long term, they're able to think and act, strategically, where am I trying to go? And they really are looking and scanning the environment and talking to other people and learning about that. So that's the strategy piece on the business side. On the human side of that, it's who's going to get me there. So they're looking and saying, what are the kind of people? What kind of skills do they need to have? What kind of outlook? What kind of mindset? What kind of worldview do they have to have? Because that long-term business strategy has to be matched against those people. But in the meantime, you've got to get there. So you've got to be able to execute. You've got to be able to build teams and make decisions and have accountability. And you've also got to be able to have the kinds of relationships with people that allows all that to take place. So that's really the leadership code.
Okay.
And in the middle of all that is the human being, himself or herself, the leader, himself or herself, that's making all that stuff happen. So we said, what are the attributes of that person? So they've got to be learners above all. And they've got to be resilient. And they've got to have passion. And they've got to know what they want to do. So that's really what it is. It's really, the leadership code itself is really sort of the basic blocking and tackling of, what is a leader, no matter where they are. They could be in the church, they could be in the military, they could be in business, they could be in community, they could be in a school, they could be in a home. Those are all, the more they can master those 4 quadrants and those set of attributes, the better off they'll be.
Okay. And you've interacted with a lot of leaders over the last couple of years, whether in Asia or also in the US, right?
Yeah.
What's some insights that you can draw, in your interaction with all these leaders, or lessons you've learned from them with regards to leadership and the ability to get results and the ability to reinvent yourself?
It's funny because my co-author Shane Cragun and I, of this current book, Reinvention, a question we asked ourselves a couple years ago was, okay, the leadership code is what it is. That's what all leaders are good at, and that's never going to go away. But we're living in peculiar times. We're living in times that are really tumultuous, right? They're very fast moving, and there's a lot of different inputs coming in from all over the place. What is special about this time? Is there anything additional that needs to be put on top of what I just talked about? And what we found is that actually, yes. What we found is that you do need some distinctive qualities in order to succeed in these days. So we came up with this notion that basically, because things are happening so quickly, and so it was such complexity, that to be a leader in these days, you need to be able to accelerate faster than any change that's taking place outside or inside the organization. If you're going to lead, you've got to be out in front. So you cannot be lagging behind all these other things that are happening around you.
And you see that as a common denominator among the leaders that
Yes, because they're out there. What they're doing is they're sensing, they're out there, they're sensing what's going on. They're able to make changes. We call it innovate. We call it vibrant innovation. Not just their products and services, but anything that needs to happen in their organization. So it could be HR, it could be their brand, it could be really anything to do with the business, their business model, of course.
Sure.
They're also able to affect that change. They're able to not just come up with the innovation, but actually make it happen. So they are people who can sort of drive the change to the organization.
Okay.
And they're also people who can get everybody else up and excited about behind it. So we call it shared energy, which goes beyond the notion of culture. It really goes into really having a common vibration around, who we are, what we do, how we handle all that.
Okay. We're going to take a quick short break, and we're going to come back and talk a little bit about Reinvention, the latest book by Kate and Shane.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome back to the Leaderonomics Show. I'm with Kate Sweetman, author of Reinvention. Kate, we were talking a bit about Reinvention. You talked about leadership and the importance of that as a base.
Yeah.
And one other aspect you talked about was this whole thing about shared energy.
Yeah.
Can you give us an example of what that means?
Yeah, sure. I mean, one of the things that we've observed around people who can, leaders who can make organizations move quickly these days, which is what has to happen, move, pivot quickly, is that somehow they get their organizations to act more like flocking birds than like a bunch of silos that are getting lined up. And we have a terrific example for that, which is outside of the business world. He's actually my daughter's track coach. And his name is T. Shaw. His name is Tom Shaw,
T.
but
Shaw.
everybody has a nickname on their
Okay.
team, which is actually part of the whole bonding.
All right. I
But
like
his
that,
name
T. Shaw.
is Tom Shaw. He goes by T. Shaw.
Okay.
T. Shaw has only been at the school for 2 or 3 years. And in the 2 or 3 years that he's been at that school, he's taken that girls' whole running program, cross country and track, from being ordinary, middle of the road, to being literally all Americans. And so you
So
have
really
to,
the nationals.
yeah, nationals.
Okay.
I mean, it doesn't get better than that. I mean, beyond
Okay.
that, it's Olympic trials. I
Okay.
mean, these are like amazing. And you have to say, how did that happen? And so we've been talking to Tom a lot, and T-Shaw a lot, and what we have learned about what he does is really quite amazing. And the reason why this actually came to my attention is not just because he had a winning season, but because actually one of my daughters is on his team, and she wrote a college essay about him. And the conclusion she came to in her college essay was that what this guy does is he doesn't just create a team. He creates a culture of love. And everybody wants to belong to that culture of love. And what she means by that is that he requires them to show a lot of respect for each other. He requires them to pay a lot of attention to each other. And as a result, they have so much care for each other that they want to excel not just for themselves, but for their teammates. And their teammates want to excel for them.
Wow.
And there's a lot of detail that goes behind that. But basically, it is the most cohesive, sort of loving, supportive, and yet accountable group of kids you've ever seen. And what it means is that, inch by inch, second by second, they take down their own personal times to exceed expectations they never even thought they could have of themselves.
It's amazing.
So it's amazing.
Yeah, and, I mean, the big struggle, I know there's a lot of great sports stories that, somehow don't get translated into the business landscape.
Yeah.
How do we, translate that whole shared energy piece into a business? Because, I mean, imagine a business where everybody's, wow, excited on a Sunday night. Wow, tomorrow is Monday.
I can't wait to
work.
go to school. Actually, or to go to work.
Yeah.
It's true. There's so many lessons learned, and in fact, we're really still researching it. But one of the lessons learned is you actually need to care about other people. You need to care about them. It's a collective result. They actually sit down before an engagement. In their case, it's a track meet.
Yep.
But in our case, it could be anything. And they sit down and they say, what do they want to accomplish as a group? What do they want to accomplish as individuals? What are they afraid of? How can they support each other? It's absolutely beautiful. And then they do it. Then they do it. And everybody is really cheering each other on. And as the leader, he is really paying attention. He knows what everybody's good at. He knows what everybody's bad at. He has a plan for everybody. And because he is so expert and his intention is so good, they trust him and they'll do what they say.
And they rally for him.
They
And
rally
for
for
each
him.
other.
Yeah, and they'll even do the things that they don't want to do. They might want to run in the 800, but he wants them to run in the mile. He'll say, you know what, I need you in the mile, and they'll go do the mile. So,
Amazing.
yeah.
So, and really that's part of what is covered in Reinvention? Is that part of what, is that what's covered in Reinvention?
Well, what he actually is doing is reinventing these girls. He's actually reinventing them. He's actually helping to change their self-concept from I'm an okay runner to I can be a national champion.
Wow.
Which is really incredible.
So tell
and
us
then he breaks it down and gives them a plan.
So tell us a bit about Reinvention. I mean, what is this book about? And what are some insights that we can draw from it?
Okay, so there's so many insights. Where can I start?
Sure.
No, Reinvention is a recognition that sometimes in this very fast-changing world, we're not just changing; we're actually putting everything on the table and reinventing. So, so the book is basically an acknowledgement that we live in just a peculiar time. And so we consider it to be sort of a field manual to extreme change, where we started with why is it happening, what can we do, how can we get other people to come along, and then how can we get the organization to come along. The other thing that's interesting about the book, we have been told, is that the formulas that we have in there work just as well at the individual level as at the group level, and we really. That's quite deliberate on our part because, typically these books are written either at the individual level or the group level. But we said, you know what? you can't change an organization without the people changing inside
Absolutely,
it.
yeah.
And we can't change the people without the organization changing around them, because otherwise they go back into a hostile environment. I had a great experience earlier this week. I was giving a talk in Toronto, and it was aimed at HR people. And we were just talking about how does reinvention affect the role of HR. And at the end of the talk, we have the Q&A, and this woman raised her hand and she said, what I took away from this talk is that I can't hope as an HR person to help reinvent how we relate to the business without reinventing myself.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that was very moving, and everyone in the room really got that.
So it's really about us reinventing ourselves first, and then
Exactly.
also reinventing the organization in
Yeah.
the process.
Exactly.
And I know you have a couple of stories and formulas in there talking about why reinvention is important and how we can go about reinventing ourselves and the organization. Would you care to share one or two key, maybe a story that may stick out for you?
Yeah, well, we have a story that we love to tell, that we tell a lot, which is the story of, again, not a business story, because frankly, a lot of other stories are more interesting. But we love to tell the story of Scott versus Amundsen, which is the race to the South Pole.
Yes.
So it's 1911, and Britain wants to be the first to the South Pole, but so does Norway. And so they put forward these two heroes, Scott and Amundsen. And they both had the backings of their nation. They both had all the resources in the world. They both could make any choices they wanted to around people, around process, around food, water, animal, however, whatever it is you need to do to get to the South Pole in 1911. They made very different choices. They basically made very different leadership choices. And as a result, Amundsen's team skied into the South Pole to victory, and Scott's team struggled on foot and perished. Mm. And there are a lot of stories in there that we get into in the book. But the main thing that we take away from that is that Amundsen had a very open mind. And he was very, very willing to say, this is an unusual situation. What's going to make me succeed? And once he started with that, he started looking at a lot of different options. So for example, he and his entire team went and lived with the Inuit of northern Canada for 2 winters to learn how to survive. Scott didn't do that. He said, we're just going to march in there, we're just going to march out. That's what the British do. Amundsen's team said, what should we wear? We're going to wear furs because that's what the Inuit taught us. How do we bring our stuff with us? We're going to use sled dogs because that's what the Inuit taught us. These are the world experts. We're going to learn from them. Scott said, we're going to wear wool because that's what the British Navy wears, and we're going to bring ponies because that's what we do. Sadly, the ponies either fell through the ice or perished under the conditions right away. So anyway, it's a tremendous story, and what we learn from that is that even very smart, very well-intended, very well-funded people can adopt blindfolds that get in the way of their being able to even see the reality that they're dealing with.
Right.
And even if they can start to see the reality, they almost reject it because it's just not in keeping with what their mental model is.
So it's really about being able to see that change before we can change ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Oh, fabulous.
One
final question. I mean, if you were advising a group of CEOs, what advice would you impart to them?
Keep your eyes open. Keep your eyes open. Use everything to track what could possibly be going on around you. Listen to your people, and go outside your usual channels, because these days changes can come from anywhere. And so, yes, read your industry newspapers, but also go to technology conferences. And what's happening at the economic forum? We've learned so much by going outside of our own normal channels now around what's happening with technology, what's happening with economics, what's happening in political situations. All of these things are vital to what are going to be impacting your business.
Fabulous, Kate.
Yeah.
Kate, it's been a pleasure having you here on the Leaderonomics Show. We are speaking to Kate Sweetman here on the Leaderonomics Show.
Thank you.